Welcome to Product-Led Growth Leaders. And we have an interesting guest today, a fascinating guest that I'm going to have a lot of questions about the nature of their job titles. But he has a background in business development, solutions directing, sales. He's been a founder, a CEO. He has been an executive chairman and board member of many tech companies. And today he chairs TrialKey.ai, which is an ML technology that deals with clinical trials and their design optimization and prediction. Saurabh Jain, thank you for being with us today.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Thomas.
Great, great. So let's start off by talking about your path. I went through a little bit of an overview of your path over there, but kind of just how you got to to the point where you have a certain relationship with products now,
Yeah.
and how you got here.
Yeah, totally. So, look, software engineer by trade. Did my own tech startup when I was young, ran that for about 4 years, and I sold that to Telstra, which over in Australia is like the equivalent of like an AT&T. So I did that. Then after that, when I kind of sold that out, I went into sales for about 10 years, just kind of by mistake. Then kind of fumbled my way back into the technical part of my career and went through. I was in a company where there was a big disconnect between sales and product and software dev. So they kind of popped me on top of all of it. So then I went back into the technical part of my career where I kind of ran a sales team, but around a software dev team. And this was probably 15 years ago before anyone used the word product, which is called development team. And this was back before it was called cloud. It was called ASP, Application Service Provider, back in the day. Did that for a while, then kind of worked my way up the technical side. So CIO of an ASX 100 company, across 52 countries, absolute dream job. And then by a bit of luck and a bit of chance, I ended up getting a CEO gig of a publicly listed SaaS business here in Australia. Company called Urbanize. Was there for about 5 years, CEO for the last three. And that's when the whole kind of product thing really gelled. I mean, look, you went from, a 20 mil market cap to about $100 million business over that time. We went from about six products we took out to market, took them down to two. And we did them really, really well. Then after that, had a bit of a lifestyle change. My wife and I, we had twins, and you got to have balance in life, as my wife always tells me. So I was a CEO of a company in like 13 countries, traveling 2 weeks a month. And you can't kind of do that and be a somewhat present dad at home. Um, there's only so many hours in the day. So I ended up dropping my work down to a couple of days a week. My wife dropped her work down to a couple of days a week. So now what I do now, I'm on three parts of my life. I'm on about half a dozen company boards. Chairman of two, exec chairman of TrialKey, which I guess we'll talk about today. My wife and I, we travel for about 3 months every year, all different parts of the world. And the last part of my life, I'm a bit of a meditator. So I try to go off and do meditation courses a couple of times a year as well. Hope that gives
That's
a bit of
awesome.
context.
Yeah, no, that's great context there. So thank you for providing that. Um, so one of the things, and I alluded to this before I introduced, is the job
Mm,
roles thing. So when I went down kind of your work history and all that stuff, I
mm.
kept seeing chairman, chairman, chairman. Now we don't
Yeah.
see that over in the States. And so for the audience,
Yeah.
so Rob is in Sydney, Australia.
Mhm.
And so I don't know if there's regional differences, but we don't see chairmans very often. So help us understand like what role a
Totally.
chairman typically does.
I think the equivalent in your part of the world might be like a president. So the CEO reports to you. So you're responsible for the board and the governance and hiring, firing the CEO, retaining them. A lot of the execution then happens at the CEO level and below, but you're more on the higher level. Hey, do we have the right people on the exec team? Are we attacking the right markets? And do we have the right people on the board to really support the CEO?
Great. Awesome. So thanks for clarifying that. And so, as you walk through your history, we've got the foundation in engineering and you
Yeah.
going into sales and being exposed to the market side and
Yeah.
then kind of dipping back into the engineering from time to time.
Hmm.
What is your current relationship with the product
Yeah.
as the person, the vision? Are you the visionary behind it? Are
Hmm.
you dealing with the features and how to divide things up? What's your relationship with the product?
Yeah, totally. Look, it's probably still about half my role because I'm Trocky. It's quite a small business. And the problem to solve for most high level management is like, how do you build a great product and then actually sell it as well? So about half my mind space is on the product side, looking at what are we building, how much we're investing. Are we building something that someone's going to buy? Are we building something more exploratory? Because you've got to do a bit of both. And then once we've built it, how do I make sure the salesperson has something that they can actually sell and monetize and generate some cash out of? So it's still very deep in the product, but that's about half my role. We have a CTO, so he does a lot of like the engineering side of things. But where him and I work really well, I'll go more on the feature level. Hey, want to be able to do this, want to be able to do this, or is this technically possible? And then him and the data science and the developers will figure out what you can and can't do.
And how important is PLG to your product, right? So being product led, and for most companies, you can't necessarily achieve it right away. You're not quite there
Mm,
yet, and maybe you depend on SLG. Do you is that something that you are accomplishing right now, or you aspire to in the future? Product led.
mm. Yeah, totally. You kind of find that you'll be product led at the really start of your journey when you're pre-revenue, like a company like ours. In the middle, and this happened at Urbanize, we kind of lost our way. We became super sales led, but that's just kind of what you do as you go up the growth curve, and you're not totally sure if you're building the right stuff or you have the right people, and you kind of lose some of that internal confidence. And then hopefully, most organizations, when you do really, really well, where you've got a whole bunch of customers, a whole bunch of cash, and you have time for product. But normally it's just time for sales, right? And getting some revenue through the door. When you have time for product, I tend to find then you kind of bend back into that product space and a bit less in the sales space.
Awesome. So, all right. So let's jump over to TrialKey,
Hmm.
TrialKey.ai. Can you share with us what is TrialKey and what's the vision behind it?
Yeah, totally. So the thesis that we had is everything about the human body and how we interact with medications and drugs and devices, all that knowledge is already somewhat known in the world. Um, it's just stored in all these different places. Um, so all we did over 3 years and a whole bunch of money is we got 350,000 medical journals, medical trials documentation. We built our own custom LLM, so like a version of ChatGPT, which was hyper tuned towards clinical information. And then we pick up about 700 variables of each of those documents. So, who's sponsoring it, what the condition is, what the phase is, how many enrollments there are, how often a patient's interacted with, what's the ingestion method? Is it a needle? Is it a tablet? Is it an IV? What the molecule is? What the dosage is? So we grab all that information from these 350,000 clinical trials, and then we actually try to predict from an AI perspective is what leads to a trial succeeding. And after a lot of effort, we can do that with about 90% accuracy. So now before a clinical trial starts, we can tell you with about 90% accuracy whether it's going to succeed or not. Um, and we've kind of gone heavy on the explainable AI. So a big part of then what we do is then we'll actually tell you, okay, now it's a 32% chance of success where the baseline for this condition is 15. But if you want an extra couple of percent, you need, two more countries. You got to change this location to this location. These are all your competitors that are trying to solve the same problem all in different ways. So it gives you a nice kind of domain space about what's kind of happening in your world, in addition to actually predicting whether the trial will succeed or not.
So no, that's
Hmm.
super interesting, right? What kind of AI is being used? Because I wouldn't
Hmm.
think that an LLM could accomplish that. So I'm thinking it's something
Hmm.
other than an LLM.
Yeah, so traditionally, so there's actually two different parts of AI. So when we first started off on the journey, it was all structured data that you'd get online. So there's about 90 variables that you could pick up. So then there's just like some sort of decision tree which figures out, hey, what variables lead to likelihood of success. We use a forest algorithm, that's the unique one that we use. So what the LLM allowed us to do was to turn unstructured data into structured data. Or you literally upload a clinical journal, you say, what's the molecule, what's the compound? You ask 700 questions. And that's what got us from about 90 variables, which is about 70% predictability, to about 700 variables, and that's why we're up about 90% predictability.
And that does work. I've actually tried that on my own where I'll take a data
Hmm.
set. Now, mine will
Hmm.
tend to break down after a certain amount of time because it can't deal with all the.
Yeah.
But if I'm telling it, here's the data, I want you to
Hmm.
go in, here's what the columns are, here's what the rows are. Please go in and do this step. Now do this step. Now do that step. So is it kind of the LLM is a it makes it possible or streamlines the process of transforming the data so that you can put it in a place where it can be
Yeah,
analyzed?
totally. So the way it works is that there's all this data in the world which is completely unstructured. And what LLMs have allowed you to do is to change it into structured data. And if you're going to build like some sort of decision engine or decision tree, it only actually works with structured data. So it allows us to do that first step where you figure out all these extra variables from a document, turn them into hardcore structured data, and then you feed that structured data into an actual decision tree or decision engine.
Great. And then are you guys already an MVP and a
Yeah,
beta?
totally. So it's taken about 3 years. So we launched to market about 2, 3 months ago. So you can go online, you can sign up for free. We haven't even had time yet to build up a paywall, but we will very soon. And now we're just kind of chasing our first set of revenue. I'm trying to figure out what the actual use case is. And probably a great example of, I don't know if it's product led or sales led, but there's been all these use cases that we actually hadn't thought about. That customers have kind of asked for. Now we're kind of going down that path. So for example, next couple of weeks, we're going to launch a clinical trial simulator. So you haven't actually done the trial yet. You've got your documentation about what you want to do. You upload that, you key in a whole bunch of variables, and we'll literally run that trial in AI for you in a couple of minutes. And then we'll say, awesome, that trial has a 32% chance of success, but here are all the things that we recommend to make it an optimal clinical trial in humanity. And then you can log in and you can see, look, I can't do that, or I can't afford 7 countries, or this is the wrong intervention model for this type. We can't do that. That's not what this therapy does. And you'll be able to actually adjust it. So when you do that trial in people, it'll be most likely to succeed. It'll be like a really well-designed trial.
And so it seems to me that the magic here is it's not so much that the AI, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Hmm.
is so intelligent that it's like a scientist thinking up what is going to happen. Instead, it's taking, as you've pointed out, the
Hmm.
existing articles, the existing scientific knowledge, 350,000
Yep.
articles that normal people just don't have time or the capacity to research and interpret
Hmm.
all of that. And it's finding it and pulling things that you just wouldn't have found otherwise and
Totally.
putting it in a consumable form, and it's structuring it
Yeah,
as you pointed out.
totally. And I think the next step we're thinking about after we're done with this is actually to kind of delve into the generative AI. We can actually say, awesome, I've got this, I've got small cell lung cancer. I'm in stage 4. Here's my therapy mode. Build an actual protocol for me. Build a clinical design protocol that's most likely going to succeed based on all the other cancer trials and small cell lung cancer trials that have happened in the past, and which ones have succeeded and which ones have failed. What's the best way to kind of attack this problem?
Now, have you had to deal with evolving needs of the product as you've put it out there and
Hmm.
you've gotten your first responses with folks? Has it had to shift at all? Have you changed direction,
Hmm.
or is it kind of it's so new and kind of so innovative that you can stay on the same path for the
Oh,
first few
look
years?
at Look, I think you can almost never stay on the same path because customers always kind of be like they always come up with use case that you hadn't thought about. Like another use case is on the competitor side of things to see, who else is kind of trying to solve the same problem. So I might have a therapy which is invasive surgery, and it's super effective, but someone might have a therapy which is a tablet twice a day for a month. They're probably going to succeed and they might get out to market before me. So all those kind of complex, nuancy things, which is all hidden in the data. But that's something that we would not have thought about before. But it's when a customer uses it and says, "Oh, it'd be awesome if you could tell me this as well." That's when that kind of comes together. The other use case which we'd thought about, but I didn't think it was going to be as big as it is, it's more for the investment community. So investment bankers that are investing in clinical trials. So with a small biotech that have couple of trials a year, a trial succeeding or failing has a huge impact on their share price. So you buy before, because we predict when as well. You buy before that inflection point, and then you sell after that inflection point. Right now, that's just me and the CTO, kind of placing a few bets ourselves, but I reckon that's a real product line one day. And it's something that we hadn't originally kind of thought about.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've seen it happen a lot with startups where you build something and you have an idea of what
Hmm.
it's going to mean for the marketplace, and
Yep.
then you find that the reason people like it might be slightly different from what you exactly anticipated, and you say, "Oh, let's go ahead and build in that direction rather than
Yeah.
something we thought of 3 years ago."
Totally. And the super hard thing to do is figure out how much of that is like noise from the market. Someone's asking for something which is actually like a dumb idea and no one else is going to pay for it and you actually shouldn't do it. And how much of it is like, oh my God, that's amazing user feedback and we should totally do that. And I think that's actually what a good product team does. It helps kind of filter those two things out so they're not distracted by the shiny objects, but they're not blind to them as well.
And it makes me think, an answer to the extent that you're willing to like share your strategic ideas, but I'm trying to
Mm,
imagine what a PLG might look like for you guys. So,
yeah.
for example, does it look like lab directors saying, "Hey,
Mm,
let's log into TrialKey, let's use the free trial version
yeah.
of it and let's run a few things. Oh wow, it's giving us some really cool information. Oh, let's do it again." And then
Mm,
kind of splitting the feature base to where you say, this is the part we'll hold out on. You can't get
mm,
a full list of all the articles, or you can't get
yeah.
the actual details of the mock study until you pay for the premium or something like
Yep.
that. Do you think about those
Mm.
kind of lines so you guys can really spread?
Oh, totally. Because you want to think about how do you monetize what we've built, and then how do you still make it free and cheap enough so people can kind of get in. And it's something that people aren't used to paying. People aren't used to paying for an AI clinical trial designer. Like that's not a thing that's in someone's budget today. So the way we're kind of dabbling, and we've iterated quite a few times on this, is we're going to give right now a free version to log in and search for any trial, including your trial if it's registered on clinicaltrials.gov. But what we'll charge for is to be able to upload your own protocol and run your own trial in an AI simulator. Because that's what like a clinician or like a chief clinical research officer or organization would do, or a chief medical officer would do. Um, and that's often when they do that, they've got a bit of funding behind themselves and they're happy to spend a couple of dollars to do that.
Yeah, yeah. So, and another thing about achieving PLG is you want the flow, the sort of workflow when people are using the product to be really nice and smooth. And so,
Mm,
UX design teams, but then also in the beginning, you're trying to build the core feature functionality out and
yeah.
put it out there, particularly if it's a really practical use case like what you're doing. To
Mm,
what extent have you guys been able to foster a design team, such as like a UX team or people tasked with
yeah.
thinking in innovative ways?
It's a luxury for a startup, right? Because often people that have not actually done this will be like, I don't know, I got to have user design right at the start. And I totally get that if you're coming into an organization where the product's already built and you want to undo stuff of the past. But if you don't have a core functionality or feature set that actually works, no matter how amazing the UI is, it's actually somewhat meaningless. And I've been in startups that have done that, where they've invested heavily on the design thing because they're like, oh my God, Apple's amazing and all these guys are amazing. We want to be just like them. And they over-index on design and under-index on kind of functionality and capability. And you end up with an amazing looking app which actually doesn't really do anything. So for us, like 99% of our investment has actually been on the actual product side. Like, can we actually predict whether a trial will succeed or not? And to date, UX has been an afterthought. But now the product's kind of working. Now we can kind of spend a bit more mind space on the UI and the design side of things. But it's still like one out of every 20 user stories will be on the design side of things. I don't know, every core true designer would say that's a bad idea, but I actually don't know how else to do it.
And there's different types of products, right? So some products, if you're building something like Slack, it would be really, really important that your interface is pretty darn easy to use because there's already so many ways to send messages
Mm,
versus something like you're doing that where the heavy value of it is in the AI and the ML.
mm,
So
yeah,
it's I think there could be an argument there for you on your behalf of what
totally.
you're saying, right?
Yeah. And I think we're a bit more enterprisey, so we won't have a billion users. We'll have a couple thousand. But if you're more consumer focused and there's probably a less educated audience and they don't have as much training uptime and they don't interact with us before they use the product, that I guess you'd probably want to over index on the UX or the design side of things.
Would you say that you guys uh try to foster a culture of innovation maybe in other ways, so maybe not on the screens in
Mm,
the UX yet, but
yeah.
in like, hey, the way we think about how we want to solve the problems, is that, do you find that to be required, or is it that you have clear features and clear requirements and it's more about engineering and cranking it out at this point?
Oh, look, I think the problem is like where the thing with AI is it's like it's not a solved area yet. It's not a solved domain space. So there's a huge amount of experimentation by how we build the LLM and we fine tune it, by even what kind of prompts you ask the LLM. Um, so for example, one theory we had is, hey, I wonder if the actual molecules and compounds are meaningful and whether a trial succeeds or not. My gut says, yeah, it should super be meaningful and be a huge predictor. But then I could just as easily say, no, it probably isn't, right? But I actually don't know. So now that's what the guys are going to go and spend 2 or 3 months. We've got this huge molecule compound database. We're going to ingest that in, link that to clinical trials, and actually figure out is the compounds are meaningful or not. My guess is, if I was to put a dollar on it, would be that they're not, that the design of the trial is actually more important than the medical components, because that's actually what the data has shown so far, which sounds super crazy and not really intuitive, but there's heaps of amazing drugs that were in a crappy design trial that never got approved, and heaps of mediocre drugs that were in an amazingly designed trial that got approved. So simple example, right? So in the early days for us during COVID, there were about 400 vaccine candidates out there. So the CTO back then ran the platform early days, but we predicted Pfizer, Moderna were number one and two, and AstraZeneca was like number 8 or 9 in the likelihood of success, and that got published in the local Financial Review newspaper, and we kind of got that right. Out of all 400 possible candidates, because what we found is if you have a really well designed trial with a great population set, with all the right kind of parameters for the trial to work, you'll know for sure if it succeeds because of the medicine versus it fails because of a bad design. Versus there was 397 other trials which were not designed as well. So there might be some amazing medicine in there or some orphan drugs which just never made it to market because they weren't trialed properly.
Are there any AI advancements that are being talked about by sort of the AI tech world? I hear all kinds of
Mm,
promises. I hear promises that I frankly don't believe from them, like
mm,
artificial general intelligence is right around the corner, or common sense,
mm,
and people throwing around the term common sense, and things
mm.
like that. So maybe they are around the corner, maybe they're not. Are there any types of new advancements in AI that, if they were to come on the market, you think would uh, assist with what you're doing?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, just on the Gen AI side of things, I mean, if you ask me, I'm like, I did my thesis in AI, like this is my thing, albeit 20 years ago when it's called machine learning and neural networks. But if you asked me 2 years ago, was ChatGPT a thing? I'd have said
Right.
no. We're not going to solve the Turing test in my lifetime. It'll be my kids that maybe might do it. Um, but then it's so a thing, right? And it's got billions of users and everyone does it and it's like insanely clever. So I've decided to stop predicting stuff because whatever I predict is going to happen in 100 years tends to happen in like 5 or 10. But to answer your question, so then how do you buddy up what we've done with some of the other kind of Gen AI stuff that's kind of being built out? So there's a huge bunch of stuff around drug discovery that people are doing. So imagine the power of an AI model that discovers drugs and molecules and compounds, buddy that up with an AI tool like ours that runs it through a clinical trial, and then imagine the iteration you can do on drug development. So right now, there's like 35,000 trials that happen in humanity in the world every year. I reckon what's going to happen is that will drop down to like 5 or 10,000, and they'll be over-indexed in terms of funding and resources. But we'll do probably millions of trials in an AI simulator, us plus a drug discovery company, and that will just be the thing. And one day it'll be completely unethical to do trials in humans before you do it in AI. In the same way, it'll probably be considered insanely unsafe for my kids to learn how to drive a car in a car. They're probably going to learn how to drive a car in a simulator, right? And once they pass that test, then they'll be allowed out on the real road.
Man, fascinating stuff. What's next for TrialKey? What do you think from the public's view of your
Hmm.
company and product? What do we expect to see?
Yeah, look, it's still, like I said, it's still very early days. So we only launched it. We're a publicly listed company here on the Australian Stock Exchange, ticker code OPL. We've only just launched the market. So now we're in that huge race to get a whole bunch of customers. So we've got a marketing team of about 5 now. We've got our first dedicated salesperson joining next month. We're recruiting for a chief revenue officer. So now we're becoming a bit less on the product and engineering side as a company and a lot more on the sales and marketing side.
Nice. So Rob, where can people find out about TrialKey.ai?
Yeah,
Well, that sounds like
that's
the
pretty easy.
website. Yeah, and where can people find out about you?
Yeah, look, easiest way is just through LinkedIn. And I'm sure you'll
Yep.
you'll leave a link to that in the show notes.
Yep. Sounds good. So Rob Jane, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.